Pleasure to deliver this virtual keynote, and I can't help but notice the contrast between you all enjoying the delights of a typical translators and interpreters conference in Ukraine and me sitting in a house in Edinburgh with a window by my side. I really miss the atmosphere of conferences, but I am aware of the power of technology to bring us much closer together than we could be otherwise. And that is, as we say in Troublesome Terps, a nice little segue, a nice little route into the subject of my talk. You know, before COVID-19 and before coronavirus was even something that most of us had heard of, it seemed that there were two big threats to interpreting globally. The first was this idea that everyone speaks English, and I may touch on that a little bit later in this presentation. But the second perceived threat was the march of machine translation, machine interpreting, what I'm calling here automated speech translation. The reason why I'm calling it automated speech translation and not machine interpreting is that if you look at how it works, it's not actually providing interpreting as we would know it. It's providing translation but turned into speech. And while that's not something I'm going to go in deeply into in this presentation, it is something that I pick up in my book, which you heard mentioned earlier. There is a direct link there that will take you straight to the website where you can buy a copy. Everything that I'm going to say is either from the book, inspired by the book, or inspired by the experience that led me to write the book. And so without much further ado, I would like to do something which speakers don't like to do. Traditionally, speakers like to give you a nice, slow introduction. We'll show you some mountain pictures. I want to do something called cutting to the chase. I want to get straight to the problem. When I'm doing research, they teach us that the quicker you define your problem, the better things will be. So let's start with Waverley Labs. Waverley Labs is a technology company, probably the biggest company outside of Google and Microsoft, trying to make machine interpreting solutions. They're the biggest in terms of the fact that their fundraising has raised several $1 million twice. First, they did crowdfunding for their device called the Pilot. Then they did more crowdfunding for their newest device called the Ambassador. And their claim, as you can see from the slide here, is that we can now say goodbye to language barriers. If you would like to look up their advertising on YouTube, their YouTube channel has lots of videos telling you how, because of their devices, you can now learn any language at the click of a finger. Ironically, I'm unable to click my fingers. I don't know what that says. But the point is that they are telling the world that their devices have erased language barriers without the need for human interpreters. Whether their claims are correct is subject to debate. Certainly when I quizzed them on the data behind their claims, they weren't ready to share it with anyone. They weren't even ready to share the testing protocols with anyone, but that doesn't matter. We're in a world now where truth and actual facts matter less than what people can make the facts say, and Waverley Labs are convincing many people to give over money and buy their products. Then we have Google, and I'm sure that phrase, "then we have Google," has been said thousands of times over the past 3 years. Google are trying something new. The reason why I talk about automated speech translation and not machine interpreting is that traditionally, and in the majority of cases, machine interpreting, as we might call it, is done by the computer listening to what you're saying, turning that speech into text, sending that text to a standard machine translation system, and then taking the text produced by the machine translation system and turning that into speech again. In other words, automated speech translation is simply translation with audio. Google have a new system, well, it was new last year, that aims to completely break that model. And their new system is called Translatortron, and it takes the waveform, the mathematical representation of your speech with no text, and turns that into a new waveform, a new mathematical representation of the target language without any text being involved. In other words, it goes straight from speech to speech. Technically, that's an incredible feat, but again, they haven't released their data publicly. They've just released snippets and expected us to believe that that's what the algorithm did. But it is a breakthrough because it aims to make you sound more like yourself in any other language that you speak. And it's taking seriously the arguments that the experts have been making for years that any automated speech translation system that ignores intonation is missing out on a large percentage of the content. But for our purposes, for the purposes of discussing raising the profile of human interpreting, we have to know this exists, we have to know the claims they are making, and I would like to invite anyone here who's taking notes to look for this blog post and to do an analysis for yourself of what they get right about interpreting and what they get wrong about interpreting. And lastly, we have a delayed innovation. The Olympics were supposed to take place this year. Like many things that were supposed to take place this year, they're not taking place this year. But for the Tokyo Olympics next year, Japanese technology company Fujitsu are supplying all of the doctors in the hospitals with speech translation systems to hang around their necks. The idea behind this is that the doctors can't possibly be expected to learn the language of every patient who could need treated during the Olympics. Neither can we expect sick people to suddenly become fluent in Japanese, so let's have a device that does the interpreting for them. Now again, this makes a lot of assumptions about what medical interpreting is, about what interpreting is as a whole, about what the technology can do. But it does answer one of the key questions about interpreting now, which is how do we scale interpreting? How do we make interpreting available wherever it's needed to whomever needs it when they need it? It's not traditionally a question that we've asked in the profession. It's a question that technology companies are asking. And if we don't provide that answer, they will. And so we have this issue where technology companies are telling the world that they're going to replace us and that they've already got the technology to do so. And what is our answer? Well, our answer is a question. Our answer is, what do we do now? What do we do in response to that challenge? The first thing that we do is not to talk about quality criteria, but to go to our clients. I took this photograph, it's probably one of the prettiest photographs I've ever taken, at a show called The Meeting Show. It's a gathering of people in the events and meetings industry who come to London every year, again, not this year, and they have a convention and they talk to each other. I go to the Meeting Show regularly. Last year I went to a show called International Confex. At that show I made it my aim not to sell, but to listen to as much of the training that was going on as possible and to talk to as many people as possible to find out what was going on in their world. One of the things I found out is that the trend towards English-only events is beginning to reverse. A director of an events management software company was pleased to tell people that they're seeing a trend towards events in a number of languages instead of English, events in local languages. They are seeing companies who no longer want all of their staff to be trained just in English, but to receive information in the language that they speak every day. That's not necessarily an open invite for more interpreting for various reasons, which we might have to go into later, but it does mean that the fear that we had of being replaced by everyone speaking English only was fundamentally unfounded. But we only learn these things if we're in the world of our clients. To paraphrase, or to use the phrase of Chris Durbin, a famous translator, we need to spend more time in client land. And what does that allow us to do? Well, fundamentally, it allows us to land new clients. I was on a flight to a board meeting for my national association, and I was reading the magazine of the now no longer flying airline Flybe. And in their magazine, they talked about issues to do with international business, and I realised that they were talking a lot about international business, but nothing about how interpreters enable international business. So I pitched to the editor, and to cut a very long story short, I ended up with a 3-page article, which is still online in their magazine. The article lasted longer than the airline. What are you going to do about it? But this article, I pasted on every social media feed that I possibly could, and the managing director of a translation agency said to me, "Oh, I noticed that you know how to do consultant interpreting work. Could you do that for us? Our favourite client has an interpreting event and we're a translation agency. Could you do could you be the consultant on this job?" So I then became the consultant interpreter for this job for a very large French brand, for a very good agency, on the strength of an article that I wrote showing that I understood what businesses needed from interpreters. That's the marketing side of things. But there's also the public relations, the raising awareness side of things. In 2018, I started going to events on exporting. And my national government, the Scottish Government, are very keen on getting people to export. It could be something to do with that strange thing called Brexit. I don't know if anyone's heard of Brexit. But I was at this exporting event. And again, it was lovely, but they didn't mention anything about languages. So I wrote this blog post saying how wonderful the event was, but that they hadn't mentioned languages. To cut a very, very long story short, I end up at the offices of Scottish Enterprise, the Scottish Government's business development agency. And again, to cut a very long story short, I ended up delivering a webinar for their international trade advisors, people whose job it is to advise businesses on what they need to do to export, on what they need to do to trade internationally. This webinar was then seen by the chief executive of the Scottish Centre for Language Teaching, who invited me to be on their panel of experts at an event they were running on languages for business. Being in the room with people who might need interpreting at some point led to being in the room with the people who were advising businesses on international trade, led to delivering a webinar, which is still on their website, which in turn led to being seen as an expert. As wonderful as it was for me to be seen as an expert, what mattered more was the fact that suddenly translation and interpreting, and especially interpreting, were topics that people of influence wanted to speak about. Does anyone in your government want to speak about interpreting? Does anyone helping businesses in your country realise how important interpreting is for exporting? If they don't, who's going to help them find out? Who's going to tell them? Who's going to let them know? But what is it that you do? That's a really obvious, silly question. When I first began freelancing, I lacked clients. And I would take on just about any work that I was vaguely capable of doing: translation, interpreting, proofreading, editing, checking. And so I went networking within the first couple of years of me beginning freelancing, and I went to this networking meeting, and someone said, "What do you do?" And I said, "Anything you'll pay me for." That's not a good answer to tell people what it is that you do. That could have all sorts of results. But what is it that you do? If I were in the room with you and I shook your hand or bumped elbows with you, we're not allowed to shake hands now. If I bumped elbows with you and said, what do? You would likely say, I'm a translator, I'm an interpreter, I'm a subtitler, I'm a dubber, I'm whatever. Is that what you do? Before you answer that, I want us to look at 4 key marketing messages, because often we talk about what we do in a way that doesn't make sense to anyone outside of our industry. The most basic marketing message is that translation or interpreting, I'm going to concentrate on interpreting, makes a difference, hopefully a positive one. That's the level of public relations, helping people know that we exist. The Chartered Institute of Public Relations in the UK says that public relations is simply about improving your reputation and managing your reputation in front of whichever audience or audiences you're interested in. Do important audiences in your world know that interpreting makes a difference? Then there's how to ensure it makes more of a difference, and this is what I call client education. Client education for me is not us wagging our fingers and saying, you need to do it this way, you need to do it this way, you need to do what we tell you. No, client education is understanding the ways in which interpreting can be made more effective and more efficient, more cost effective even for clients, in a way that doesn't compromise on the end result. Client education is working with clients to get them the best service that they can get in a way that will be acceptable to them. Then there's the level of marketing, which is where we start targeting a specific sector, a specific set of businesses, and say, here's how it can make a difference to you. We cannot do marketing if we don't understand the difference that clients want us to make to them. What difference do our clients want us to make, and how can our interpreting make that difference? And lastly, the level which I'm still not great on is, here's how I can deliver that difference. Sales is all about you as an individual winning the client, you as an individual being able to sign that contract. That's where you have to stand out individually and ask for the sale. The reality is that most of the time, in most places, we're only going to be doing the first 3 and the 4th one comes eventually. The audience gets smaller for each of the 4. Public relations is any publics. Client education, we have to know roughly what the clients are trying to do with interpreting. Marketing, we have to know what they want it to do. And sales, we have to be able to deliver it for them. So in those terms, what is it that you do? What difference do you make? Instead of telling people your job title, I'd like us to practice telling people what our job does for them. Do you help people make money? The number of people I have met who are afraid of saying that we help people make money, but if you're a marketing translator, if you're an interpreter at sales events, that's why you're there. Hans Vermeer, a famous German translation theorist, says that accuracy, or said, he's been dead a long time, he said that accuracy only matters in as much as it's necessary for the purpose of the translation to be fulfilled. In other words, accuracy only matters because if we're not accurate, the thing doesn't work. It's not important for its own reasons. It's important because it helps clients do something. Do we help clients make money? Do we help clients save money? What's the cheapest way to get interpreting? Do it right first time. Do we help people save time? How much quicker is it to have an interpreted meeting where people understand each other straight away than it is to try and muddle in 4th language English? We're entitled to say to clients, we help you save time. Do you help clients avoid legal action? If you're working in legal interpreting, you might not feel comfortable talking about how you help clients make money or save money. But if your interpreting wasn't there, would they be more likely to be sued? Probably yes. So say that. Talk about how professional interpreting means that legal processes can go quicker, can be more effective, can be more efficient. Talk about that. Does your work tangibly change lives? I've stopped translating for about 3 years now, but when I was translating, one of my most strangely enjoyable translations was a translation on digging toilets in parts of Africa. I know that people's lives were changed because of that, because now their hygiene is better. I did volunteer interpreting once, where my interpreting enabled people to understand and to raise money for a group of people whose only economic activity was selling their wives and children into prostitution. If your interpreting tangibly changes lives because you do it well, that's what you should be saying. So what is it that you do? Probably one of these 5 things. And it probably needs to be said in the words that your potential clients are using, not our terminology. And so we come to an incredibly common mistake. Go to any interpreter website, go to any translator website, and you'll see something like, I have been passionate about languages from a young age. At the age of 20, I enrolled in the university of whatever it is. I have a passion for languages. And? No one wants to hear about your work. Outside of agencies, no one really cares about your specific QA processes. In fact, they might have a different meaning of QA than we have. No one wants to hear about your background unless it's really relevant. They want your help to do their work. Imagine going on a date with someone who ever only talks about themselves. You wouldn't go on a second date. If in our websites, in our work, in our outreach, we need to be talking a lot more about what our services can do for clients in terms they understand, than we talk about how great we are, how many degrees that we have. Don't make that mistake. That leads into a similar mistake from Julia Poger, well, not from Julia Poger, that Julia Poger pointed out, when she said on Twitter, it's a very rare colleague who talks about the pain points event professionals could feel if they didn't use us, rather than just talking about quality and avoiding globish. I know we have a presentation coming up on quality and interpreting. My position is that 99% of the time, the word quality is a problem. Instead of talking about quality, we need to start talking about the difference that we make. There's a whole load of research that I could go into about the issues with quality, but we shouldn't primarily be measuring quality with numbers. We should be measuring quality with what happened next. What did our clients think? What happened because of our work? Juliet is right. We need to be talking about the pain that people would feel if they didn't have great human interpreters, not how great we are on some metric or another. To beat the bots, we have to be better than them. It sounds kind of obvious, but here are some ways that we have to be better than them. I've used the word quality again when I said I'm profoundly uncomfortable with the word quality. But my definition of quality, if I have to have one, I'm using it because it's a word that we use between us. My definition of quality is across the entire process. From the first time a potential client is in contact with you to the last they ever hear from you. What's their experience? We're competing against software companies who are saying that you can get interpreting at the touch of a button with no preparation, with no sorting out, with no contracts. We cannot and should not try to deliver that. So what we should be delivering should be so high quality, should be so wonderful, that the entire process feels like it's worth the effort of sending briefs, dealing with invoices, dealing with paperwork, dealing with flights, dealing with accommodation. The process should be incredible. That's what I mean by quality. From end to end, everything should be amazing. We have to be more relevant. We have to be more specifically aiming at the actual pain that our potential clients are feeling, the actual issues that they're dealing with. The way that we talk about interpreting, the way that we market interpreting, the way that we sell interpreting has to sound like it's coming from someone who knows their sector. We have to have a better vision than the bots. What does it mean to have a better vision? Go on the website of any company selling automated speech translation, and you will see a vision. It's a vision of a world where a tiny device linked to any smartphone can make you fluent in any language at the touch of a button. It's a vision where language barriers disappear. It's a vision where travel isn't restricted by your linguistic knowledge. It's a vision of Star Trek come to life. What vision are we selling? We can't sell the vision of a tiny device inside your ear, nor should we. But what vision are we selling? What does the world look like with expert, incredible, powerful, relevant human interpreters? I can't give you a vision for interpreting because the vision that I have for human interpreting may not be fully relevant to your context, but you have to have a vision. The vision that's going to convince your potential clients isn't my vision, but yours. What does the world look like with incredibly powerful, wonderful human interpreters ready when needed? What does that look like? And we have to be delivering better results. At this point, I know many colleagues who would get profoundly uncomfortable with me because they will say, it's not our job to deliver results, that's up to the clients. To an extent, I agree with them. You're not the salesperson, you're not the director, you're not the speaker. Well, we can discuss the last one. But, and this is a big but, if your interpreting is not making a difference to the event, why are you there? We're all aware as interpreters how our individual decisions can cause people to understand better or to misunderstand. Where we aren't selling the product, our interpreting can make the product sound attractive, or it can make the product sound awful. While we aren't lawyers, our interpreting can make the question understandable to the witness or incomprehensible. We can, in our interpreting, sound persuasive, convincing, emotive, powerful, weak, vulnerable. There is an extent to which the results of the meeting depend on us, because if they didn't, we wouldn't be there. So the results of human interpreting must always be better than the results of automated speech translation. On the day that human interpreting is not delivering better results than the machines, human interpreting can be replaced by the machines. And so we come to a rather disappointing conclusion. It's disappointing because everyone that I talk to about the future of human interpreting and machine interpreting and automated speech translation wants me to forecast the future. People say to me, so does your book tell us whether we'll be replaced or not? And I say, no. Actually, if you read the book, it presents 4 potential futures, ranging from the machines taking over to human interpreting being the gold standard. My capacity to forecast the future is limited to my capacity to forecast human behavior. And I don't know about you, but I think humans are rather unpredictable. And so I want to leave you with this thought that I want to develop slightly before I open up to questions. What if the future of interpreting is not fixed? What if the future of interpreting hasn't been written yet? What if the person 2 meters to your left or 2 meters to your right or 2 meters in front of you or behind you has as much control over the future of interpreting as any technology company? What if the secret to raising the profile of interpreting in the shadow of automated speech translation isn't at all to tell the technology companies to be quiet or to wait for an association to do it? When I was on the board of the Institute of Translation and Interpreting in the UK, I lost count of the number of times people would say something like, the association should do something about. We had a chair at one time whose favourite response to that was to say, okay, I agree. Would you like to do it? We all agree that we need to raise the profile of human interpreting, that human interpreting needs to be better known, better respected. Many of us would probably say that we want to be able to finish our careers without being taken over by a smartphone. Okay. What are you going to do about it? That makes this presentation profoundly uncomfortable for a number of reasons. Number one is that, I don't know about you, but I often go to conferences and enjoy sitting in the presentations and taking notes, but I very rarely use those notes afterwards. Recently, I came across notes from a conference that I went to about 4 years ago, and I don't think I had looked at them since. Oh. Let me give you a suggestion. Today, I would like you to note down one thing that you can do if you're an interpreter to make your services higher quality, more relevant, producing better results for your potential clients. You may not be able to travel to their events. Their events might not be happening, but they're probably online. How can you find out more about the pain that your clients are feeling? How can you make your interpreting more relevant to them? How can you improve on the interpreting that you're providing so that it's better than any machine can possibly do? I'd like to invite you to note down one thing that you can do practically to make your services created in a way, delivered in a way that cannot be replaced by machines. It really is, and I emphasize this, it really is over to you. I'm trying to do my best to get into client events, to talk to potential clients, to talk to key people, to work with government agencies. Good. What about you? What can you do today? What can you do tomorrow? What email can you send? What website can you go on? Do something. Do something. The future of interpreting hasn't been written yet, but the future of interpreting, the profile of interpreting, is dependent on the people sitting around you in the room. It's dependent on the people listening to this via the web stream. It really is over to you. I deliberately wanted to leave lots of space for questions. Again, there's a book link up there. If you have any questions, I'm going to flip to the feed where I can see the video. So, thank you very much. I should be able to hear you fine. Feel free to throw some questions at me.
Yeah, Jonathan, thanks a lot for such an inspiring speech. Even though it's not the first time that I was listening to you, still, every time I get some takeaways. So if anybody has any questions, I think that you could even ask them in Russian or Ukrainian. I could interpret them back to Jonathan. I mean, after all, that's what I normally do in real life. Or you could do that in English.
Jonathan, hello. Thank you very much for this inspiring, really, report and all the information you've provided, especially the overview, the one that you've provided in the very beginning of your briefing. Thank you, because I was really too lazy to do that myself, and I was very fortunate to hear it from you. Now, and my question really relates, I guess, more to this introduction that you had in the beginning of your speech. The American Association of Translators, they once had a kind of a publication, and it was a big one. And like somewhere in the middle, they were citing a Washington Post article that says, well, I can't recognize every word that was used, but the idea was that if I would be writing a letter to my distant cousin that I never actually remembered properly, then I would use a machine translation or something like that. But if I do something that is at least remotely connected to my business, then I would definitely use a translator. Now, you've described a lot in the ending of your speech about the future possibilities. But if we are trying to split the interpretation and the translation part of the job, well, that was an introduction to my question. And the question is, do you think, or how much time do you think the translators, this is one question, and / the interpreters have? Do we have one more generation until the machines would be able to translate just as good as the interpreters and translators? Or do you think this will never happen? I know you've already tried to answer that, but if I would ask you for a specific answer, okay, like we have a generation, can we send our kids to be trained as the interpreters or translators? What's your point on that?
That's usually the question that's a question that I asked people in Geneva last year. My take on that is twofold. One, I think increasingly the market is going to change. I think human interpreters are going to increasingly find themselves in more and more premium, high-risk settings. I think our standard, anything that doesn't have a risk of things going horribly wrong is going to eventually go to the machines. Anything that's routine, anything that is predictable, anything that you can get a large corpus of text towards is going to go to the machines. I heard recently of a technical translator who lost their job because their company realized they had such a big corpus. The machine translation was as good as a human. On the other hand, at the moment, machines cannot do emotion, they cannot do context-based decision-making, they cannot do humanity. Until computers can be humans, there will be space for humans to interpret, and there will be space for humans to translate. But that means that we have to put humanity at the core of what it is that we do. So how long do we have? I don't know, probably longer than we think. But I would say that different areas will drop at different times. I think technical translation will probably be affected first. Repetitive translation will go first. And then gradually we will see things changing. But at the moment, I'm not seeing artificial intelligence get to the point to where it's fully human, and I'm very suspicious of the claims that it's going to get there in 10 years because they have been shown to be based on flawed data.
Okay, thanks for the answer. I think Andrew was asking because he himself has 2 kids who are now at school, so I mean it's natural to worry about their future, of course, and we're also wondering.
I have 4 children, so...
Yeah, I know that, yeah. So, more questions from the audience? Anyone? Oh, you do? Okay.
Thank you, Jonathan, one more time for your speech. I'm a person who wants to work as an interpreter, and I wonder what can you recommend for me to do, or any exercises, any life hacks to improve English skills and to become an interpreter. So just a usual question from a beginner, and I really do want to hear the answer from you. Thank you a lot.
So, the important question with that is, what kind of interpreter do you want to be? I don't agree with the separation of interpreting into settings, but I would say that interpreting in legal settings tends to have different requirements than interpreting at many conferences. For conference interpreting, there are wonderful books. There's a book called Conference Interpreting by Andrew Gillies. There's some wonderful exercises out there. But what I would say is that whatever interpreting you want to do training. Preferably formalized training. If it's for conference interpreting, I would try to find a university, if your language pairings allow, that is in the UTI list. UTI represents some of the highest levels of conference interpreter training. So get the skills first through training. But at the same time, I would say get to know an area that you would like to interpret in. So if you want to go into legal interpreting, find courts that have a public gallery that you can sit in so that you can see how courts work. If you want to do business interpreting, look at hanging around business events so that you can see how businesses work. Find a sector that you want to get to know, that you want to interpret in, and spend time there. While I'm disagreeing with the separation of interpreting into, legal interpreting, medical interpreting, conference interpreting for various reasons that I won't go into, I do agree with interpreting in different sectors and in different contexts being different. So get to know a sector, get formal training, and really push yourself from an early stage in matching your interpreting skills to a market somewhere.
Okay, we have another question. Could you please bring the mic to Alexei?
Hello. Greetings from the interpreting team over there, and I'm one of them, and I'm ecstatic to have colleagues like this sitting here and the people in the industry around. You should be here next time, seriously. Yeah, we'll sprinkle the coronavirus with something very soft, but it will disappear like the gnats here. There are no mosquitoes here. I can't believe it. So I have an industrial-related question. Sorry for this introduction. You were saying about the interpreter being available on the touch of a button in your mobile phone. And I've been curious for about 6 months now with this exact idea of interpreting available like a taxi, like you order a taxi on Uber app. And I found 2 apps, and why I was looking, because I was scared because of this crisis, and everything kind of went dead for a month or 2, and I was, scared crapless. So I started looking for these apps that are available online where you can order an interpreter. And they said interpreter, which I meant maybe they are doing simultaneous, because now the only option to do simultaneous in an online event is via Zoom, because they have an excellent algorithm and a encoding algorithm that is really good. But other than that, not so much. So I was looking, and I found 2 apps. Maybe because I applied for a job there. What I did, I found their contacts, and then they said that we are hiring. And if you're an interpreter anywhere in the world, you can apply. So I did. And it took me a month of kind of email exchange. I sent my CV over to them, and they were responding, okay, if you want, you can, here's an online, like a survey or questionnaire you have to fill out, and then it's done. I'm there, I'm hired, but I'm getting no clients, 0. One of them is Genie, maybe you know it. It's literally like Genie, like out of the bottle. And it seems to be a Chinese enterprise. And it took me a month. They were quite specific in their questions about my career. And then I had an interview online, 6 a.m. in the morning, with a great Chinese guy who really knows his linguistics and translation, but there's zero clients. They specialize, they claim they specialize in medical clients. Like somebody is in an emergency room and he speaks Malaysian or something, and urgently you need someone. Because I was running around scaring my clients a year ago. I was kind of going wild in my fantasies, and I thought, well, someday maybe, it's going to be, we have to be available like a taxi, like right now here. And my clients were scared. Don't tell me about it, please. It makes me very uncomfortable to think about that future. So that's what you described. Another one is date interpreting. It's a US-based company, and I applied there too. You can find them. It's not a product placement. I'm just sharing the stuff. And 0 customers. I experimented. They said the hiring person. Sorry for taking this long. I think it's useful for us to know what to expect. And they said, well, you just push your button available for interpreting and sit and wait till somebody will need you. Then the call comes through, and there are 5 available interpreters online. The algorithm automatically selects someone. If someone is not available within 5 seconds, it selects another one, and then it exhausts the list and so on. So my question is, have you heard about them? Have you tried any of them, or do you know customers who used it and how well that was? Like a taxi, or was it horrible?
So
thank you.
There's 2 things going on. One, I had the opportunity to chat to some founders. So I chatted to a company that were in an early stage of developing an app just like that. And by the time they'd finished talking to me, they were very, very sad. Because fundamentally there's a problem with that model. And that is getting the interpreters is an issue, but also it falls into this no man's land between cheap human interpreting and free machine interpreting. And my take so far, and certainly there should be a new episode of Troublesome Interpreters coming out where we had the head of a company called Wordly who delivers automated speech translation for events. And basically, they were saying that they're seeing this kind of fast-reacting medical translation as a place where machine interpreting could come in, because all you're really needing is, who are you, what's your name, are you responsive, what's wrong? Certainly, I know already that many health services already have phone interpreting in place for that. And so these kind of taxi-style apps, they look like they should work, but I think fundamentally the market is a lot smaller than they think it is, because there's automated speech interpreting on one side, automated speech translation on one side, and on the other side there's established phone interpreting. So they're challenged on both sides, and I could see that the company might make a profit, but I could see it being challenging for interpreters to get it. The other thing is that there's a difference between Uber and a taxi company. So, one day we're told that we'll all be going around in autonomous vehicles. So you get Uber, taxi companies, buses. Buses we all expect to turn up at a certain time. Uber and a taxi company, we expect that we can phone up or go on an app and it's there. The selling point is convenience. If I want to book a private jet, I'm not expecting to go to an app and have a private jet pull up at my house. If I'm booking a limousine, I'm thinking back to my wife and I celebrated 15 years of marriage recently. When you book a limousine, you don't expect to book a limousine on an app and have it just turn up in front of your door. There's an experience that you expect. And so I think actually as human interpreters, we should be thinking about, yes, there is a need for interpreting that's just there at the touch of a button, fine. And there may be a place for human interpreters to supply some of that, although that's going to be a high pressure market. There's going to be some automated speech translation there. There's going to be phone interpreting there. What about the limousine market? What about the sports car market? What about the market of people who actually, the most important thing is that this gets done really well. If you've got a negotiation for a contract, you know that, if you try to get a machine to do it and it's free, that free interpreting is going to end up costing you more money than a human would have anyway. So perhaps rather than us thinking, how do we get into the interpreting like an app market, or how do we deliver our services in a taxi way, and we can think about that. What about thinking about what are the clients who are going to want interpreting like limousines? And is it just possible that the taxi interpreting, the Uber interpreting, is going to make more people familiar with interpreting and grow all of the markets? Certainly, I've heard people say that about translation, that the march of machine translation has meant that more people can access translation and that there's more people in all areas of the market. I don't have the studies to show it, but I've heard people say that. So what about thinking in that way about interpreting? What about thinking, I could be an Uber interpreter if I wanted, but maybe I should be a limousine interpreter. Maybe I should be a private jet interpreter. Where do you want to position yourself, and do you know enough about the people looking for that kind of service that you can actually deliver it? I know myself, I'm not yet able to deliver private jet style interpreting, but it's where I want to go. So I want to learn enough about my clients to be able to deliver it. And I need to find out what clients are in that space and what are they going to be looking for.
In Lamborghini, in terms of quality, because coming back to what you said, your star, your shining star should be your quality, how good you are. And basically then what we have now with these apps who have zero problems is it's just a marketing problem. It's not an interpreter problem. So they have to just work their way in a new market and start offering their clients, okay, we have this online app. And they just do the marketing. And the interpreter's job is to be good at it. And that's it, right?
And there's a big question mark over how good an interpreter can be if they don't know the situation. But that's a whole other story. Let's not go into that. But that is an issue.
Yeah, I think that we should finish up on that. And I think that becoming a real private jet interpreter is something we should all aspire for. And I'm thankful for everyone who has been with us here at this morning session and who has listened to our keynote speaker, Jonathan Downie. Please give him a round of applause. Yeah, thanks for being with us today, and we hope that you'll be able to join us next year. And if I'm not mistaken, I think we have a group photo on the agenda, so don't run away just yet. And I guess we'll be gathering here, and the organizers are going to tell us where to sit and what to do. Thanks again, and you have a lovely day, Jonathan.
Thank you. See you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.